Sputnik. Regular viewers know that Gayatri's been away reporting on the Indonesian elections. While she was gone, I took the opportunity to interview Dr. Paul Hobday. We've all read plenty of prescriptions on the future of the NHS, but they're usually in doctors' handwriting and difficult to follow. Dr. Hobday is a retired doctor, but unusually, he's also a highly readable novelist. His book, The DECEIT Syndrome, published by Strand, is a work of fiction. Or is it? It deals with what the novelist alleges is a conspiracy to privatise the health service and, actually, everything. It paints a nightmarish picture of a dystopian future when the clock strikes 13. I asked him how this novel came about.
It took a while. I qualified the year that Margaret Thatcher came to power, and I've spent my whole professional life worried about the NHS. Initially, I was in medical politics. I was fighting the BMA to try and retain Bevan's principles, all seemingly to no avail. Eventually, after Lansley's reforms, I thought, well, got to do something more. So I stood for Parliament on the Save the NHS ticket in 2015. That failed to get the message across as well. So after that, in that year, I was feeling quite low and wondering what to do. And it just struck me that to get the message across, it had to be something that the public can really digest. It's a complicated issue. And if it can be presented in novel form, as you say, entertaining, tragic as well, but interesting for the reader, then with a bit of luck, the message may well sink in and we might get something done about this.
It is a real novel, somewhat to my surprise. I expected it to be a treatise thinly disguised as a novel. But it has real flesh and blood characters, even sex in it.
Oh, absolutely. It's got everything there.
A lot of jokes.
Well, yes. I try to put a lot of humour in it because the bottom line is I just want to engage the public. There's no point in producing something that's that size, that's dry and undigestible. I just really wanted to get it, something that people could tune into. So I wrote about what I know. I know about the NHS. I know about family medicine. I know about all sorts of different things that have been my experience in my life. And I've woven into this a lot of tales that people will be very familiar with, the conspiracies of our time.
Tell us then, what's the plot?
The plot is about a GP, quite an experienced GP, who gets increasingly angry, I think, and depressed about the day-to-day patient that comes in on a regular basis, despairing and really quite badly affected. And this pathology seems to be increasing. So he eventually comes to the conclusion that this has to be something to do with the policies of successive governments over the years, because they're bringing in all the health issues related to poverty, etc., etc. Then he goes a bit further and starts looking into it, and he realises that he just cannot help his patients when, at the same time, one of the key government policies is the dismantling of the NHS. More and more obstacles have been put in his way of how to do his job. He just cannot do it effectively anymore because it's been basically taken apart, and it develops from there and ends up as you say, as a dystopian novel about what will be the case and what will happen in the years to come.
But which government do you speak of? This government has no intention of privatising the NHS. The NHS is safe in their hands. Yes. They're forever telling us so.
Yes, they are forever telling us so. All governments from at least 1979. In 1988, John Redwood and Oliver Letwin wrote a paper about privatising the NHS. Oliver Letwin's famous book, Privatising the World, is a blueprint for the step-by-step salami slicing that they're doing to the NHS. They knew because the Cabinet Papers show us this in 1982, that they couldn't sit on a manifesto of getting rid of the NHS. It just wouldn't wash. So they had to do it in a very planned, clandestine manner. And they're still at it. Most of it is done without the public's knowledge. It certainly hasn't been voted on. It's undemocratic. But they've appointed some years ago a man called Simon Stevens, who has worked for United Health in America. He was head of global expansion, which says it all. And he was brought back by this government to carry on the privatisation process. But he was employed by Blair as well. So it's been the same process for the last 40 years, I'm afraid. And it's the neoliberal agenda.
You mentioned the word dystopian, as did I. It's Orwellian, the future that you see, and the commercialization of everything, the privatization of everything reduced to the cash nexus,
yes,
is not confined to the NHS in the world as seen through the pages of your novel.
Yes, I didn't want to focus just on the NHS. I wanted to put it into the wider context. Oliver Letwin's book about privatising the world, we all know, started with all the utilities, the railways, etc., etc. They knew that the NHS was going to be a hard nut to crack. They could con the public with the other things by running down the services. Noam Chomsky's quote about how do you privatise things? You run them down until the public get fed up, and they think that the privatisation is better. They've left the NHS to the end, really, and they're working on it. Chapter 18 will give you a guide, which is factual, of the 18 or 19 steps that they've gone through over the last 20 or 30 years to convince the public that the NHS is, as they put it, an outmoded form of healthcare.
Now, we may or may not be leaving the European Union. If we do, one of the fears some people have is that this will make Britain ever closer to the United States, effectively becoming the 51st state of the Union. You kind of presage that in your novel.
There's a lot of American involvement because the Americans, having saturated their own health market, are very keen to expand into every other health market they can. And
it's a very lucrative market, isn't it?
Absolutely. What a prime target the NHS is.
You put a figure on it? I mean,
yes,
what sort of plum is it?
Basically triple the money-making machine that it is now. They're talking of, we spend about 120, 130 billion a year. The Americans have worked out that this is going to be at least 300 billion market that they can tap
per
year that they can get into with all the different companies. Most of the CEOs of these companies on salaries of $30 billion a year. The whole plot is to really make some people, or a few people rather, extremely rich.
I've got to put this point. What's wrong with that? We pay for the clothes we wear. If we have money, we have better clothes. We pay for the restaurants we go to. If we have money, we get a better dinner. Why is it that health should be unique?
Once you mix doctors and money, you are really in trouble. If their clinical decisions are made subject to how much they earn, which it is in every other healthcare system, apart from the NHS and Cuba, then people will have unnecessary investigations, unnecessary treatment, unnecessary operations, and obviously very dangerous but incredibly wasteful.
I proselytise for Michael Moore's great film Sickle,
yes, brilliant,
which in a way did some of the job your novel does, of taking what can otherwise be, I promise you, quite an opaque subject, and with the transfusion of humour, colour, human personal interest, bring the subject alive. I personally think it's Michael Moore's greatest film. Have you seen the film? Did it influence you in any way?
Oh, absolutely. I saw it years ago. It's more than 10 years old now, but it's as pertinent now as it ever was, and I would urge anybody to watch it, because although when I watched it first years ago, I thought, thank heavens we don't have that system here. Now I'm actually not past the anger stage, past the depression stage. I'm actually scared that we are just about to have that system introduced here, and the public haven't a clue. By the 15th of May, GPs will be asked to sign up to what are called primary care networks. They are the building blocks of, this gets a bit technical, they are building blocks of integrated care providers, which are the equivalent of the American health maintenance organisations and the accountable care organisations. That is that's government policy for the whole of England to be covered by 2021. In other words, in under 2 years. This is all happening under the radar. Those integrated care providers will then be taken over by the private companies, and they will have budget caps and rationing. And the real worry for patients will be not only that, but the fact that you will lose your GP. The GPs are being herded into bigger hubs of at least 50,000 patients. You will be travelling further, and the chances are you will not see the same face twice.
Let's hope it remains in the realm
Yeah.
of fiction. Dr. Hobday, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.